In this video, we'll add a countdown timer to our HTML page. So to start off, what we basically will be doing is we will add something or some code to our HTML page. So what we want to do is we'll go into our index.html, and this is say where would you like your timer to be, and let's just say that I'd like it to be here. So I'm going to create a div element, and I might give it an ID in case I need to come back and refer back to this location. So inside the div, I'm just going to close off the div element before I forget to do so. Now inside the div element, I am going to have a paragraph. Now inside the paragraph, you can put in whatever you'd like to display to the user, something that is statically there. So say I want to say time remaining. Okay, I'm just going to save and see what that looks like. So this is going to be sitting there the whole time. And then what we would like to dynamically change is what will be sitting in the span element. And also I'll give it an ID in case we need to, we definitely need to reference this, because this is going to be an empty span that will have the timer change or update the time, minute and seconds. Okay, so display wise, nothing's going to change because this part here will be dynamically changing depending on the jQuery code that we'll be putting in. Now, this file is also like we are basically just got comments there to help us with our video or with the demo of this. However, keep a note that this is also a continuation of what we did in a previous video. So I've kept the work because we've used this part to actually populate these options. So it's kind of relevant, but not really to this video directly. I do want to mention that the code we'll be writing will go inside the ready function, and that's just to make sure that all of the HTML code has actually been fully parsed and is ready to be used by our jQuery code. So this means the jQuery will only execute after all of the HTML code has been parsed. Okay, so that part is all sitting inside the ready function. Okay, so let's just follow the comments and then do the work. Here we declare a variable to set the initial duration of the timer. So this probably is not very, you can probably go without this one. Unless you want to sort of, whenever we give that time, you can put in a variable, and you can actually just pass the time in as an argument to the function that we'll be writing. But I think my preference is to have a variable, so this way we can just change the time whenever we want. So, actually, it does say seconds here, but there's a typo, so I'm just going to fix it. Okay, now 10 seconds is not really a good and enough time for any user to complete anything, but this is just for testing purposes. For testing purposes, we want a very small time so that we can see how it works, but in reality, when we are publishing a page, you want to give a time frame that is sort of realistic to how much work they need to do. So let's go with 10 seconds. Next, we declare a variable to store the interval ID that'll be returned by the setInterval function. So later we'll be calling this function. And this variable is useful because it'll help us keep track of the timer, and then we can use that reference to start and reset, or stop the timer when we need to. So let's give it a good name. Let's say timer interval, so something relevant to what it's basically doing. Next, we need to write up the function that'll be in charge of starting and updating the timer in our page. The function takes duration as an argument. I'm just gonna scroll down. This is where we actually call the function. So it seems like we've given it a name already. It's called start timer. So let's go here. We'll start with declaring our function using the function keyword, the name of our function, and whatever argument we want it to take. So here we specify that that's going to be the duration, which, by the way, we said was 10 seconds over here. Okay. Next, let's close off the function before I forget that and I get all the strange errors. I'm just going to save and refresh, making sure I haven't got anything any major issues there. So where is my, oh yeah, I'm just gonna scroll, it's actually at the top. Put these things down right here. So if we've got any errors, it's going to show in our console area. Okay, let's scroll back up and go to declare the timer. So we need to declare 3 variables. The first one is the timer, and initially we can set the timer to the duration so that we can actually change that value. So we want to capture that value back into the timer, and alternatively what we can actually do is get rid of that argument and just pass in and just work with this variable. But yeah, I think it's good to have that argument so that if you want to change the value, depending on how you want to call the function again. Okay, so variable time is equal to duration. Now we want to preserve this inner variable here so that we can actually change that. And we've also just declare minutes. We won't initialize it yet, and seconds. We now set up, I think that's what I meant to say. We will now set up our interval by calling the set interval function. That's the same function that we called here, and the result will be saved into our timer interval. Okay, so over here, set interval. So whatever call to this function we do, where is it? We want to give it 2 variables. Now the first 2 arguments, sorry. The first one will be a function, and we will declare that function and close off the function. Where do we close it off? Somewhere here. I'm not sure where to close it. Probably here. Yeah. Okay. So that's the first call. Sorry, the first argument. So we've given it 2 arguments. The function that we want to repeatedly call. That's our first argument. We still have to write in that function as well. And the interval that we want it to run for in milliseconds. In our case, so that'll be so this is the first argument. This whole thing happening here is our first argument. And the second argument is how many milliseconds we want this to run for. So in this case, we want it to run every second, so that's 1000 milliseconds. Now the returned integer value is an interval ID that will be used later to reset or, cancel the timer. So that's what we will use this timer interval for. Just let me close off this one. So what this means, so that's the second argument. That the first argument, so here we've just closed off that part. The first argument is an anonymous function here. The second argument is how many times we would like to run the interval that we want to run every millisecond, which is 1 second. Yeah, so the return value will be an integer value, so we want to capture that into our variable that we've declared earlier, the timer interval. Okay, now let's save and refresh. It's okay, no mistakes yet. Next, we want to calculate the minutes. Using math.floor can be used to round down the division and to get the minutes. So here we're saying minutes is equal to math.floor. And then what we want to do is use whatever time we've got there, divided by 60. So that's the duration. Now in our case, we've actually got, I'm just going to put this as a comment, we've actually got 10 divided by 60 because we've only got 10 seconds. So that's actually going to give us a 0, okay, with our duration. So we've got 0 minutes, which makes sense because we've only got 10 seconds. Now let's calculate the seconds. For the seconds, we'll use the modulus operator, and this can be used to get the remaining seconds. So seconds is equal to the timer modulus by 60. So what that means is actually 10 modulus 60 gives us 10. So that's actually 10 seconds. 10 seconds, 0 minutes. That's what we had. Okay. Next, we want to update the content with ID is equal to timer. If we remember, this pan element has got our ID called timer. We want to update the content sitting in there to display the time in minutes and seconds. I haven't got hours, but you can definitely adapt this to have hours. So we will refer, sorry, I need double quotation. We'll refer to our ID with hash and its name, and dot text here we will say display there the minutes, and here you can format it as you like. I'll refer to M for minutes, and for concatenate seconds plus, and I'll also refer to the seconds with S, and we close off our text function. Next, when the timer reaches 0, clear the interval. Let me just see what that looks like. Okay, not showing up yet. Okay, now when the timer reaches 0, clear the interval using the clear interval function and display time is up. Now it is, for the purpose of this video, we want to keep it simple. So we just want to say time is up, but you can do other things if you like when the time is up. So here we want to check if the timer, so this is where we decrease the time. And when it is less than 0, we know that the time is up. So here we can use that clear interval function. And we will use our interval reference, that time interval, and close it off. The next thing we want to do is display time is up. Time is up. Okay. Now, if I save and refresh, nothing's going to show up because this is all sitting in a function that we haven't called yet. So that's the next step, is we want to call the start timer. So let me just copy it. Call the start timer function we wrote, passing in timer duration as an argument. Now that's 10 seconds, which is a variable that we have mentioned here. Because that's an argument, you can always pass in whatever number you like there, but let's go with 10. Okay, we'll work on clear later. Let's just make sure that this actually works. Okay, so now you can see that it's actually, can you see the timer? So it's looking good. Now then it says time is up. The only thing is though, is that when we say clear, it doesn't do anything. So we want the clear function to be also associated with this timer to actually clear it up. So let's do that. Clear the interval when the element with class clear button is clicked. So let's just double check that that is actually there. So that this is associated, the clear button has also got the class called clear button. So from here, we want to do a call. So when class clear button is called, so is clicked. Okay, so this is actually associated with the click event handler, and it's gonna call this function that we will anonymously write. I'll just close it off here so I don't forget to do that later. Clear the interval using the clear interval function. We basically similar to what we've done here. And then repeat the, or restart the timer, so that's basically a call to the start timer method. Okay, sorry, I've accidentally copied it twice. So something is wrong there. Is, I think, the end of our function. There we go, it's looking good. So now that's 8 seconds. So if I clear it, it's restarted. So it's looking good. And if I clear, I think what would really help is if we can see the whole thing. So like that. So clear, you can see how it actually clears. Okay. The only thing that we can actually do, which is to do some CSS over here. Now for that class, so for that div that we've done here, that div fixed timer, we can actually style it up. So here we can position this to be fixed such that if the user scrolls, it would still be there. So even if we scroll, the timer's still there. That doesn't look good though. So this is relevant to the browser window. Now we can specify it for it to come or to set a distance from the top to be 40 pixels from the top of the browser. So now it's a bit more realistic, and then when we scroll, it's still showing. So let's see what else we can do. Let's get it to be 50% from the left. So now it's somewhere here. And if we wanted to actually have it right in the middle, we can use the transform. We can transform the element using translate X minus 50%. So here we transform the element such that it is moved left by 50% of its own width, and basically we're just centering the element on screen like that. What else do we have? We can add a background color. I don't know what that color is, so let's just see what it looks like. Okay, and then I can add a foreground color because nothing is showing. Okay, so now it's looking like that. We can also add a font weight, making this a bit more bold. And we can also add a padding, 4 pixels. We can also have a width such that it takes 40% of the browser or the viewport. So yeah, now it's looking much better. We can also have sort of circle those sides and just make them less sharp, border radius. Maybe 4 pixels, similar to what we have for the, and maybe increase the padding. Actually, I'll make that 10. Okay, so we've got those sort of circular, it's a bit more circular here. You can increase that, make also 10, it'll be a bit more round. Yeah, they're a bit more round, but I prefer it when it's slightly less round. It kind of blends more with the top part. And one more thing is, yeah, okay, so it's still sitting on the content, so that can be improved, but in terms of it sitting in the middle, yeah, so still can be improved, but at least we have a timer. And you can definitely change the time and give it more, say 60 seconds. So when we start with 1 minute, and then we go down to 57, 56, and it goes down. And the thing is, now when we clear, we can still see the timer. So when we clear it, we can still see the timer, and it's looking good. Okay, I hope this video has helped you, and I'll see you in the next ones. Thank you.